Welcome College Football Nation. As my regular viewers would know, I would usually introduce my videos as Welcome Bronco Nation. But what I have to say today applies to every single team in college football. And my regular viewers might also note that I sound a little bit different today. That's because I am recovering from a cold which has delayed my video production by about 2 days. So, for all of your own safeties, I'm going to be wearing this mask so that I won't spread any computer viruses to you. No, I'm just kidding. As long as you're all sitting back 6 feet from your computers, we should be okay. Now, what I'm going to be suggesting today will not only fix the super conference issue that has been suggested for a long time and is becoming a very real possibility with Oklahoma and Texas moving to the SEC in 2025, and it will also address the playoff expansion that's being proposed. But the main thing that this will address is an issue that's existed in college football for a very long time, which is the disparity between the Group of Five and the Power Five. Right now, the Group of Five has basically been subdivisioned off into a separate Division II type level of FBS Division I college football. The Group of Five has no chance of getting to the getting to the national championship or the playoffs. This issue existed under the BCS system, but it has been exacerbated by the playoff committee and the current playoff system. So this situation will negate the need for playoff expansion, will create a fair system across all of FBS football so that every single team has a chance to get to the college football playoffs, and it will allow for a system of super conferences that are fair, that make sense geographically, and that don't end up with SEC having every single team of note in college football. So let's get on with the video today. So this video is titled, I'm going to be reading off of these PowerPoints today. Again, something a little bit different than what I usually do. The solution to super conferences and playoff expansion, a way to a fairer and more profitable FBS. So today we're going to be going over the issue, which I've touched on briefly, but we'll go over a little bit more in depth. The solution, the impacts of my proposed solution, pros and talking points of the solution, what the revised conferences would look like, additional comments. This is just some additional fixes I think could occur within college football, and then a summary of what we've discussed. I might leave that bit out, but you get the idea. So the issue. OU and Texas announcing they are seeking a move to SEC, which has actually been announced now since I started creating this, that they are moving to that in 2025. It reduces the Big 12 to just 8 teams. Additionally, it increases the SEC to 16 teams, and the conference is reportedly looking to add more. This has kicked off the Super Conference scramble that has long been discussed but never seriously considered, as the Pac-12 and Big Ten have already discussed attempting to expand in fear of being outclassed or losing members to the SEC. There are currently 2 commonly proposed Super Conference formats. The first one is one where the Power 5 conferences that currently exist promote some Group of 5 teams, maybe Boise State, maybe Cincinnati, BYU, Notre Dame. Well, Notre Dame's not really a Group of 5, but you get the idea. Take some of the upper-level teams from the current Group of 5 or independents, put them into the current Power 5, and then separate the rest of the Group of 5 conferences into a new division of college football. So basically creating a new division of college football, relegating the remaining G5 teams to some lower tier division of Division I AA football, kind of like an FCS level. The second plan, more recently discussed, and this should be terrifying not just for a Group of 5, but for all teams, including Power 5 teams. Second plan, more recently discussed, has SEC expanding to 20, 24 or more teams and creating its own division of college football, with more teams potentially joining later. The issue with both of these proposals should already be apparent. Even if the Super Conference ideas never come to fruition, the Group of 5 conferences have already been effectively partitioned off into a sub-level of Division I football, with the creation of the playoff system and the practical possibility of any Group of 5 team ever reaching the playoffs. This, among other things, has sparked calls for an expanded playoff system, which many see as detrimental to college football itself. And even in an expanded system, with the way that the committee and its heavy biases towards Power 5 teams perceives Group of 5 teams, the only way a Group of 5 team would ever get in is with a guaranteed Group of 5 slot, which further extenuates the growing divide in college football. My solution. The solution: 4 power conferences linked to 4 group conferences with 4 team playoff and a fair relegation system. This is how it would work. We would divide the remaining Big 12 teams between the Power 5 and Group of 5 conferences. Additionally, we would take the Sun Belt, which is the smallest Group of 5 conference with only 10 teams, and divide its teams up among the other Group of 5 conferences, thus creating 4 Power 4 conferences and 4 Group of 4 conferences. We would move UMass to the FCS, which honestly has been a long time coming, and divide the remaining independent teams up among the 8 remaining conferences, thus creating 4 16 Power conferences and 4 16 Group conferences. We would then link each Power 4 conference to a Group of 4 conference based on geographic proximity. Pac-12 would link to the Mountain West, Big Ten would link to the MAC, ACC would link to the AAC, and the SEC Conference would link to Conference USA. The winner of each Power 4 conference each year would play in a 4-team playoff. This would negate the possibility of one conference having 2 or 3 teams in the playoff every year and cries for issues of fairness and disparity. We would have a fair system where the four super conference winners would play in the playoff system and would create a system where all the country is being represented, not just one conference. Additionally, at the end of the year, the worst 2 teams in each Power 4 conference would move down to the adjoining Group of 4 conference, and the 2 best teams in each Group of 4 conference would move up to the adjoining Power 4 conference. So, fair relegation system, similar to what the Premier League does. Power 4 conference linked to Group of 4 conference, so almost kind of a D League within that conference. So you have say for instance, Pac-12 linked to Mountain West. If this had been in place last year, Boise State and San Jose State would have moved up, and I have it written down here, but I think it would have been Washington State and I think Colorado would have moved down to the Mountain West. Each conference would have 16 teams, so 2 8-team divisions based on general geographic area could be created, and the lowest team from each Power 5 conference division would move down to the linked Group of 5 conference division that best matched the one they were in before. For instance, Pac-12 North feeding into the Mountain West. Impacts of this solution. First, it would make football more watchable and give teams something to push for. Right now, if a team in the Power 5 is having an off year and say is 5-4, nobody is watching that team's games except for that team's fans and the fans of the opposing team. Additionally, Power 5 teams have had a tendency to slack off towards the end of the year and start building for the next season once the season turns downhill and they don't have a chance of getting into a decent bowl or into the conference championship. This solution that I proposed would give teams something to keep fighting for. If they were close to relegation, it would spark interest and national dialogue from fans of both conferences involved and across the country in general. You would have viewers coming in to watch this game, not just say teams of Wake Forest versus Louisville, if those were the 2 lower teams playing 5-4, 5-4. Right now, only Wake Forest and Louisville fans would be watching that game. But if with a relegation system, you'd have fans from all over the country coming to watch that game. You'd have fans from the ACC watching it to see who's going to get relegated. You'd have fans from the AAC watching it to see who's going to be joining their conference potentially. You'd have fans from all over the country watching this big battle that's going to change the future history of these 2 teams. Viewers are attracted to games that are meaningful, and a matchup against 6-4 Wake Forest and 5-5 Syracuse, for example, suddenly becomes a national sensation versus a bottom-of-the-billing snooze fest. Additionally, G5 teams would have something truly meaningful to shoot for, and one loss wouldn't sink a Boise State or Cincinnati's entire season. Right now, if Boise State loses 1 game, their season is basically over. They can still compete for Mountain West Championship, and they can compete to go to a basically meaningless Mako Bowl. Well, it's not called the Mako Bowl anymore, and we don't compete in that one. It's the LA Bowl or something like that. But you get the idea. Boise State has no chance of going to the playoffs, even with an undefeated season, and with 1 loss, they're basically out. With how the competitive nature of the Group of 5 right now, they're basically out of any shot of going to the Group of 5 bid to the New Year's Six. So 1 loss basically sinks the season. Now there's still things to push for, and things do happen. I mean, Boise State, when they went and played Arizona in 2014, had lost 2 games. So things do still happen, and they're able to push through. But in general, 1 loss basically sinks a season for the Group of 5 teams, and this would give them something truly meaningful to push for, because a conference championship is no longer, so actually I say that later, let me just read exactly what I said. Conference championships are no more than just another dusty trophy or tattered banner. They are a chance to completely change a school's future. So they're actually something super meaningful to play for. Impact of Solution 2 puts teams where they can actually compete and gives them a chance to reset. Kansas hasn't had a winning season since 2008. Vanderbilt has never won more than 9 games in its entire history and doesn't have a winning season since 2013. Let that sink in a little bit. Purdue's last 10-win season was in 1979 and Purdue hasn't won more than 7 games in a season since 2007. These and other lower tier Power 5 teams have very little, if anything, to play for in the modern era, have apathetic fans accustomed to years of defeat, draw small crowds and less TV viewers, and have difficulty recruiting players even compared to upper-level G5 schools. Nobody can say that these schools deserve to be in the Power 5. I mean, nobody. If you think they deserve to be in the Power 5, put it in the comments and give your reason. I'd love to hear it. But I don't think anybody can make a case for Vanderbilt being in the SEC or Kansas being in the Big 12. Nobody can say that these schools deserve to be in the Power 5 compared to top-tier Group of 5 schools like Boise State. This solution would introduce some fairness to the situation. But more than that, it would move these schools to the conferences where they would have a chance to compete and play for something meaningful. Kansas may not be able to get anything done in the Big 12, but they might be able to get bowl eligible if they were in the MAC. And Vanderbilt cannot compete in the SEC, and they cannot compete for SEC championship, but they might be able to challenge for a Conference USA title. The relegation system would allow struggling Power 4 teams to reset, draw increased TV revenue, perhaps attract better prospects now that a winning season is a possibility, and work their way back into the Power 4 when they are ready to compete. Basically, it's the same thing as a Power 5 coach kind of failing out of the league, going to like Arkansas State or FIU, something like that, working their way back in, proving their worth, and coming back into the Power 5. Basically, would do the same thing for college football teams. Third impact of this solution, it would increase revenue for all. The solution would make games more watchable and increase fan attendance and TV viewership. Both of those mean more money. At both the Power 4 and Group of 4 level, as Power 5 team seasons would still be meaningful despite mounting losses. Power 4 team seasons would still be meaningful Power 4 team seasons would still be meaningful despite mounting losses, and Group of 4 seasons wouldn't be torpedoed by a single loss. Sorry, I'm stumbling over my words here a little bit. Lower level Power 4 teams that move to Group of 4 conferences would likely find higher levels of success and would spark greater interest and thus views and attendance for their games. Playoff and bowl games would feature teams fairly selected and equally represented, drawing greater satisfaction from fans and increased likelihood of buy-in. All other revenue factors would remain unchanged, and the Group of 5 would not be relegated to an outside second tier of college football. Impact of solution number 4, and this is the last solution before we get to the talking points, and then I'll give you guys a preview of what these different conferences would look like. Impact of solution 4 would lead to greater parity in college football. Especially in the age of the NIL, recruiting imbalance leans heavily towards the Power 5 as athletes seek to compete at the biggest stage for the most meaningful prizes, both financial and athletic. The solution would allow Group of 4 teams to compete for recruits at a more equal level and with the Power 4, because recruits would know that they weren't necessarily going to be stuck in the Group of 4 forever, and potentially would have the chance to participate in a nationally engaging story as their team fights to break into the coveted Power 4. Meanwhile, Group of 4 teams wouldn't be seen as just second-tier teams unworthy of playoffs, as they are now, but rather as potential dark horses, ready each season to break into the Power 4 and compete at the highest level. As talent filtered out more evenly throughout all teams, competition would get better, and perennial powerhouses would become less dominant, leading to shake-up in the playoffs and within conferences. Parity would also be introduced through the melding of the strongest conference, the SEC, with the weakest conference, Conference USA, which would lead to Conference USA getting better with relegation, while the SEC's power would not be increased with the addition of the USA teams, like other Power 4 conferences would with the addition of teams from the Mountain West MAC and AAC. Basically, SEC, the top-tier Conference USA teams, are not going to make the SEC that much stronger, versus other conferences like the Pac-12, Big Ten, and the ACC would get much stronger by top-tier team additions from the Mountain West, the American Athletic Conference, and the MAC, as Conference USA is the bottom tier of college football right now. But eventually, overall, the teams in Conference USA would get stronger and eventually end up actually assisting the SEC in the long run. But in the short term, SEC's power is not increased by the addition of Conference USA teams. More balance overall is the point I'm trying to make. So, pros of this system / talking points. It creates an equal path to national championship for all FBS teams, creates common sense fair play system and negates the need for unnecessary expansion, prevents the relegation of the G5 to a meaningless second tier of college football, negates human factor and biases of the playoff system, restores greater parity to college football, could be easily adapted to accept an expanded playoff system if wanted, but by no means be required, provides incentive for group of 4 teams to succeed, provides incentive for bottom level power 4 teams to improve and keep pushing the whole season, provides opportunity for lower level power 4 teams to reset and come back stronger, makes the power 4 stronger by ensuring the best teams are competing, constantly infuses fresh blood into the group of 4 and sparks interest and national discussion, and it would lead to more meaningful football season, more interesting games, and more money overall, while also more equally divided for all teams. Now, the last bit of this video is going to be just simply going over what these different conferences would look like. So the ACC would only add 2 teams, so not too much of a difference here. Atlantic Division stay the same: Boston College, Clemson, Florida State, Louisville, NC State, Syracuse, and Wake Forest. However, West Virginia from the Big 12 would join in the ACC in this my format here. If relegation had existed in place last year, Syracuse would have moved down to the AAC East. The Coastal Division, we have Duke, Georgia Tech, Miami, North Carolina, Notre Dame from the Independents, Pittsburgh, Virginia, and Virginia Tech. If relegation system had existed last year, Duke would have moved down to the AAC West. Revised AAC. Revised AAC, East Division. We'd move Army from Independent would come in. So there's a lot of changes in the AAC. I'll say that right off the bat. Army would come in from the Independents, Appalachian State from the Sun Belt, Coastal Carolina from the Sun Belt, East Carolina would stay the same, Liberty from the Independents, Navy, UCF, and USF. So the East Division would add 4 teams. If relegation had existed last year, UCF would have moved to the ACC Atlantic. West Division. West Division, pretty much the same, except for the addition of 2 teams. So Houston, Memphis, SMU, Temple, Tulane, and Tulsa, all the same. They would add South Alabama from the Sun Belt and Troy from the Sun Belt. If relegation in place last year, Tulsa would have moved up to the ACC Coastal. Revised Big Ten. East Division. So just, again, only 2 teams added to the Big Ten here because they were already sitting at 14. So the teams that stay the same are Indiana, Maryland, Michigan, Michigan State, Ohio State, Penn State, Rutgers in the East Division, and you'd add Cincinnati from the AAC. I think that's the one that makes the most sense. If relegation in place last year, Michigan State would have moved down to the MAC East. West Division, same except for the addition of 1 team. So you have Illinois, Iowa, Minnesota, Nebraska, Northwestern, Purdue, Wisconsin, and you would add Iowa State for the Big 12, reuniting Iowa and Iowa State in the same conference. If relegation had existed last year, Illinois would have moved down to the MAC West. Revised MAC. East Division, teams that stay the same: Akron, Bowling Green, Buffalo, Kent State, Ohio, and then you would add Arkansas State from the Sun Belt, and then you would add Connecticut from Independent. Miami, Ohio would also stay in this division. If relegation in place last year, Buffalo would have moved up to the Big Ten East. West Division, Ball State, Central Michigan, Eastern Michigan, Northern Illinois, Toledo, Western Michigan. Teams that are added would be Kansas from the Big 12, which is fair, and then Kansas State from the Big 12. Again, Kansas State better than the MAC for sure, and would move quickly up into the Big 10 likely in the next season. If relegation in place last year, Ball State would have moved up to the Big 10 West. Revised Pac-12. North Division, California, Oregon, Oregon State, Stanford, Washington, Washington State, and then you would add BYU from Independent, and I think the best move here would be to move Utah from the South Division over into the North Division. If relegation in place last year, Washington State would have moved down to the Mountain West West. South Division, Arizona, Arizona State, Colorado, UCLA, and Utah, and then I would add Baylor from the Big 12, Oklahoma State from the Big 12, and Texas Tech from the Big 12. If relegation in place last year, Arizona would have moved down to the Mountain West Mountain. Revised Mountain West Division. Fresno State, Hawaii, Nevada in the West Division. Fresno State, Hawaii, Nevada, San Diego State, San Jose State, UNLV. Add North Texas from Conference USA. Add UTSA from Conference USA. If relegation in place last year, San Jose State would have moved up to the Pac-12 North. Mountain Division. Air Force, Boise State, Colorado, New Mexico, Utah State, Wyoming. Add New Mexico State from the Independent. Reunite New Mexico State there. And then Texas State from Sunbelt. If relegation in place last year, Boise State would have moved up to the Pac-12 South. Revised SEC. Basically, it's just going with Oklahoma and Texas added in, and this is how I think that it should work out. You would have Florida, Georgia, Kentucky, Missouri, Tennessee, South Carolina, and Vanderbilt, and I think you should move Arkansas from the SEC West. And then the SEC West Division, Alabama, Auburn, LSU, Mississippi State, Ole Miss, add OU, add Texas, and then Texas A&M. I think that's the system that makes the most sense. If relegation in place last year, Vanderbilt would have moved down from the East Division to Conference USA East, and if relegation in place last year for the West Division, Mississippi State would have moved down to Conference USA West. Revised Conference USA, East Division, Charlotte, FIU, Florida Atlantic, Marshall, Middle Tennessee, Old Dominion, move Georgia State from the Sun Belt, move Georgia Southern from the Sun Belt. If relegation in place last year, Marshall had moved up to the SEC East. West Division, Louisiana from the Sun Belt, Louisiana Monroe from the Sun Belt, and Western Kentucky from Conference USA East, and then keep Louisiana Tech, Southern Miss, Rice, UAB, and UTEP. If relegation in place last year, UAB would have moved up to SEC West. Finally, for my additional comments here, and this is just kind of overall view of things I thought would also be cool to add while we're mixing everything up. Throw these things in there too, because I think this would make college football better. Teams in the G4 and Power 4 would still be able to play each other in non-conference matchups, so that's, it's not like there are two divisions of college football, it's just that you have the Power 4 feeding directly into playoffs, whereas the other one is feeding into the Power 4. But those two Power 4 and the Group of 4 could still play each other as normal. The rankings would still be important for deciding placement in the playoffs, so it's not like the rankings are no longer important. And also entry into the best bowl games. To still create interest in national polls, I think bowl placement should be decided by the rankings. Teams could play 7 teams from their own division plus 2 from the other divisions and still leave room for 3 out-of-conference games. FCS games should be done away with. They do not add to the watchability of college football, and only weaken FBS schedules while having no football season impact on the FCS schools outside of financial paydays. Some kind of system should be put in place to prevent recruits transferring due to a team moving conferences because of relegation. Perhaps starters on a relegated team who have not yet graduated would be prevented from transferring. That's just an idea. The transfer system in general, however, needs to be seriously overhauled. Players should not have the option to opt out of bowls without serious penalty. It devalues the bowl games and decreases the watchability of college football. So, that's my video. I'm not going to read off my summary page here. You've all heard what I've had to say here. Basically, this system will help create a fairer system for every FBS team. It negates the need to expand the playoffs unnecessarily, and it keeps the SEC or even the Power 5 from breaking off and reducing the rest of the Group of 5 to a second tier of college football. And it also prevents SEC from taking over all the best teams in college football. I think if the Power 5 conferences that currently exist want to keep their status, want to keep themselves from being completely overrun by the SEC, they need to implement this system. And the Group of 5, if they want to keep themselves from being relegated to a Division II of college football, they need to implement this system. This is the only system that works fairly across every level and creates a system that is fair, equal, and even. Same 3 words, but let's say it 3 times anyway. That is fair for every single college football team. It's the only system that increases money overall, but also for all teams, and it's the only system that creates a fair playoff system overall. So thank you for listening to my video. If you like this content, please like and subscribe. I don't only do Boise State videos, I do mostly do Boise State videos, but I occasionally do videos that speak to other college football teams as well. And if you're a Boise State fan, make sure to like and subscribe. It's going to be a very exciting season. All right, thank you for listening to my video. All right, go Big Blue.